Anxiety, it freaks me out, it's driving.
Hey guys, welcome to BAM, Being Anxious, Anxious Me. So last we were talking about when you can't have sex with the same person again, and what it could be that, you know, instigates this kind of rejection from other people, your relationship, your significant other, and if it's, a deeper issue or if it's basically, a stimulus that are affecting dysfunctions and pathology, performance anxiety, and any other kind of anxiety that you might have about life. So now it's more going into the passion of relationships and what that means, and whether you are ready to be in a committed relationship, or if you're in a polygamous relationship, or if you're in an open relationship. What does this mean for the subtleties of nuances that can occur with relationships? Because the intensity of a relationship and the passion between two people will be different than it will be in a different person, just because we can't love in the same sense everybody at the same time, right? Just like parents, they can't really love their children the same. So that's why they always say that I love you all, but I love you differently. This is my three theory prong of what I guess the law of attraction is, right? And it's just a play on words. I'm basically saying what I believe that relationships actually entail. First sex, then communication, and then most importantly, all love. So in the womb, we all start out as women, right? Then the secretion of hormones, testosterone in this instance, basically determine the sex of an individual, right? Because sometimes you have mix between genders and everything. Men have a little bit more of a testosterone. So on a given day, men have 10 to 5 times more testosterone than women. The more testosterone you have, the more you'll feel inclined to have more sex. There's a spectrum between men and women, and that some men that have less testosterone are a little bit more feminine in their features, physical features, and personality, just overall, just because they don't have that aggressiveness. They're a little bit more emotional, in touch with their feelings. So it leads into anxiety. So you have men that are too testosterone driven, and basically they need to have sex. They need to fulfill that desire. And of course, we're a shameful society, so we're always trying to compete and compare ourselves to other people. So this leads to anxiety of ourselves, our performance. You have oppressions of your sexuality, right? And you have people that basically encourage sexuality. And these are two conflicting things. But once you combine them together, it becomes a practice. You have to take in consideration how we are sexual beings, and you have to embrace that, and how there is something a little bit more than beyond flesh and skin. So it gets a little spiritual when I start talking about this. It's almost like there's something beyond this life and there is this life. So we start combining them into practice. In this practice, these are the three things that I consider as part of a relationship. So you have the sex, the communication, and then the love, right? See the relationship between man and woman, and it's always going to change because everybody's different and everybody has a different dynamic. So a woman can be a little bit more masculine than another woman, and one man can be a little bit more feminine than the other. And it's always going to be a spectrum, just because as humans it's thought that we're not supposed to be monogamous and that we have this bisexual factor to us. And this goes into Freudian theory and Carl Jung as well. They actually believe that there's a spectrum within our sexuality. Men try to be autonomous, right? So their problem is that we always try to be free. So this will be the metaphor as when a man orgasms, he is depleted, he is empty, right? And then when a woman has an orgasm, the metaphor would be that she is full, right? And that she is radiant. So a man in relationship to a woman will look, right? He'll have this gaze to her. And she, from that gaze, will basically want to be seen. She doesn't want to be the seer. She wants to be seen. Now, this is the essence of how porn works and why a lot of what erectile dysfunction really is that we can't really feel our bodies anymore. Basically because we have been conditioning ourselves through pornography to just have it right then and there. Basically, it's the visual stimulation. And this goes back into the last video that I had, right? What could it be? Now, it's the same thing. So you have the sex, right? And this is just basically egotistic, right? So it's all about you, and it's all about, my pleasures and my necessities. Three things are essential, but they're also a incremental scale of how you're supposed to have a relationship. I personally believe you can't have a relationship without sex. Why? Because you see so many relationships die out, and usually what it leads to is the lack of sex, the lack of performance in sex, cheating, or anything that has to do with sex. So that's usually where it comes to first. Next is the communication, and then lastly is love, right? So there wasn't any love, there wasn't any communication, and there wasn't any sex. So it increments back and forth. When we are egotistic, we always just want something of ourselves. It's fulfilling our necessities first before anybody else's. So with sex, it's just me just having my time. And for her, if she was egotistic within the relational sex experience that you're having with her, it'll just be it'll just be for her pleasure. It's basically her being self-centered and looking out just for her. And with men, it's just, this whole notion that men just want sex. And honestly, men are very romantic themselves. They just are driven by testosterone. The more testosterone you have, the more sex you want. So when it comes to that, it goes genetically, right? So men will always seek the more beautiful childbearing women that they can find, and women are more about the connection, the communication, and the loving aspect of the relationship, caring. So now you have the communication part, and this is beyond you, right? This is beyond the egotistical stage of sex and love. Now you're more concerned with fulfilling both your needs, right? You're concerned with your partner and your partner's needs, and it's more of demonstrating a loving side to you, a caring side to you, right? And this is always going to be very important in any kind of relationship. Now, last but not least is going to be the love part of the relationship. So making love is different than having sex, and any woman and any man can attest to this and agree with it. So you can understand that you have a deeper presence to it, that it's beyond you two. It's almost like it's blissful and loving, and it's this spiritual union between you and the other person. It's almost like, wow, you are into it so much that it's like the best sex that you ever had before. And again, you go through these stages, and you can be at any stage, and you can feel it at any time during your sex. And what you do is just focus. It's almost like a muscle, and you can train yourself to be more loving as you practice it more. And this goes into a lot of tantric practices and a lot of beliefs that the tantric religious practices do. Artists and musicians that go on stage and then people say that, you know, he's making love to the music or he's having sex on stage, right? You can see that. So sometimes it's just about them. And sometimes it's about, you know, the audience and the people that they're talking to, and you can see that. And then last is when it goes beyond the definition of music, and it's almost like they touch everybody's heart. It's like more than beyond them. So again, you see how everybody's different, right? And again, men tend to be going towards freedom, agency, and autonomy. And women are more caring, more relational, and more loving than men. So we all develop masculinely and femininely. I'm not sure if those are two real words, but just bear with me. I spoke of presence and being in the moment and not letting your thoughts cloud anything, your feeling and sensation. So that would be the first part where you begin to attach yourself into relational activity that you're having. We have masculine aspects to us and we have feminine aspects to us that we all develop in. Now, in some of our stages, we will develop one more than the other. Seeing this, that as we go through these three, you know, sex, communication, and love, we might be feminine in one and we might be masculine in the other. So, for example, in the sex part, a man who's a CEO most likely will engage in, you know, non-attached sex, right, constantly. But sometimes when it goes into having a relationship with a woman who he really cares for and deeply trusts, it goes into the communication. And in this instance, he will trust her to be the dominant one, where he wouldn't with someone that he wouldn't trust or he just knew for a one night stand. Same thing with a woman. Seeing this, you can see that people have different tendencies and they get, I guess, quote unquote, turned on or aroused. They get aroused by different things, right? Some may be into BDSM, others may be into role playing, others will be into just vanilla sex. And everybody has different tendencies and preferences because we're all different people. So different things actually attract us. So having that, you can go into first, we'll go with, you know, the segue from porn into leaving porn, right? So if porn is actually a problem for you, you should probably cut it off. If you can't do it right then and there, if you're actually addicted to porn, you probably want to subtly weave it out, right? So limit the times that you're actually watching porn to bare minimum, and then from there actually, you know, move to magazines and then there from your imagination, right? Because mostly what it is that our brains are hardwired to just be aroused to that one thing. And that happens with anybody in any kind of developmental stage. And this goes into Freudian theory because as we go into the developmental stages from anal, oral, and phallic, we get fixated on these things. So sometimes we'll have Oedipus concepts or Electra concepts. So that's just a side note. So focusing back on the tendencies, a nice segue would be to role play with your partner. So this will be, you know, getting some costumes. Halloween's coming up, so, or, you know, after Halloween, they have some good clearance sales on costumes. And this will be, you know, role playing like anything that you want, basically, because it's just a preference thing. You know, I can't really tell you what my preferences would be because they would not be to your liking or yours wouldn't be in mine. So next is the communication part of it. And this is practices that you can use in open relationships, polyamorous relationships, or monogamous relationships. So you have intense eye gazing, right? And a lot of what it is that you are almost in sync with one another. So basically you'll do it in front of each other and you'll stare each other in the eyes, and you'll tell the other person on a scale of 1 to 10 how there they are. So again, going into the presence, how much of their attention you think they are with you. So if you feel like if you feel like their mind is wandering, then you'll rank it at a 1. Or if you feel like they're all loving and radiant and glowing, you rank it a 10. So anywhere from there, and it could be like from 8, 7, 4, 4, 3, right? And I learned this from David Data's Enlightened Sex. And he has another book called Finding God Through Sex, which is a highly recommended book, especially if you want to practice your relationship in more intense sexual union, right? So it goes a little bit more spiritual, but for the most part, anybody can use this. So don't be closed-minded. Please try it out before you even make an opinion on it. And what it does is that it basically touches on every aspect of sex and how you can use that in your relationship so you don't have to dissuade from the sex that you're having. It's almost like you're practicing having great sex over and over again, right? So next you have what a lot of sexual therapy does, body massages, right? Sometimes, like I said before, pornography disassociates us. So this is cognitive dissonance. And what most often happens is, we tend to use this as a survival mechanism. And we try to feel nothing in our body, right? Because it's either pain or lust or anxiety, and we feel shameful of it. Again, so we're having the balance between being shameful of our bodies and desires as a sexual being, because they want to say it's a union, but then some people say, how can you have a relationship if the sex is not good? It's all about sensation. So you'll close your eyes, and anytime we feel a sensation, we fully immerse into it. You're basically touching every part of the body but the genitals, right? So you have no arousal, no stimulation of the genitals. So it's almost like doing the opposite of what masturbation actually does. Next is actually masturbating in front of your partner, because most oftentimes what happens is that we repress our sexuality and our urges because we feel like our partner will judge us. And this is where the communication plus the love actually coincide together, because we're a shameful society, so sometimes when we're into other things that most people would deem deviant, then we'll repress that and hide that. So people that might be into BDSM or role playing or anything that would be different than the norm, right? So having this flexibility is basically being honest with your person, and being open like this basically leads to honesty. So it leaves room for communication, and you guys can communicate what are the things that arouse you, or what are the things that you would like the other person to do, what you don't like. So it leaves room for interpretation and everything like that, and you can ask questions about what they mean. And this is always essential for any kind of relationship. It's always going to be communication, because once you can communicate something, you can teach it, and the other person can learn it, and they can do the same thing because they learn how to communicate with you, and they can teach you, and you can learn. So it's always going to be a balance between teaching and learning what you want your partner to know about you and to do for you, because it's always going to be a balance between the relationships. Okay, so sometimes the tendencies are bizarre, but for the most part, trust that your partner will not judge you. Now, if they do judge you, then most likely they're not the person that is right for you, and you have to be willing to be vulnerable, because mostly what our anxiety is coming from is that we will be judged and shamed, as I talked about in my prior videos. And a lot of shame is sexual, especially in our culture. As soon as we become open, we become at ease with ourselves, and that lowers anxiety. And this could be from a plethora of things, right? And once our anxiety lowers, basically our performance doesn't really matter. So any performance anxiety that you might have that might lead to erectile dysfunction is gone. So always try to be as honest as you can, try to communicate as much as you can, and have the idea that your partner is another person, so they want to communicate as well what their needs are and what they want and what they desire as well. So having that, it's always going to be a union within your relationship. That's why they call a matrimony a union. Now, depending on your beliefs, it doesn't really matter, but for the most part, you can practice this with any partner that you have. Alright, so this entails a lot. And I hope you were able to at least grasp the initial concept of what I was trying to say, that men are going to be men and women are going to be women because of the masculine and feminine energy that they emanate and the tendencies that we are predisposed to. Why do I say this? Because a lot of what this sexual integration is going to be with love and sex is a lot of what David Deida actually practices. And what he uses is masculine and feminine aspects. So sometimes this leads to some concern about the language that he uses because it's so cut end that, men are always going to be men and women are always going to be women. Like, basically it's like women, they're always going to be submissive and men are always supposed to be dominant. But again, what I was trying to explain was that you can have both aspects because we all develop in different sexes, basically, because we both have different aspects to ourselves. So a lot of what the book is going to talk about and what I'll basically summarize, because basically what the book, in summary does, it's, makes you surrender into love, right? You're surrendering into the emotion and what is beyond emotion. Next is you're letting go of the body. The body is just a vehicle for this closeness that you're going to have with your partner, because sometimes it's almost like you and your partner are one, and when you separate, that becomes something that you feel, and it becomes an anxiety. So sometimes we feel like we become sexually addicted to other people, right? So we're letting go of that essence that we need the other person, and we become as a union. So it's again, it's going as, so we become as a union, and together we can do this, but separately we can still love each other, and we have a loving relationship. Next is unguarding your heart, right? So this is going back into the trust and the communication that you're going to have, because most oftentimes, even in relationships that you have people being together for maybe decades, or 5 to 10 years or something like that, or a certain amount of years that would be a little bit above the normal relationship that most society actually has, which is 1 to 2 years. You have individuals that still, guard themselves, and it becomes a little bit more difficult because you're not being completely honest, and the other person is always going to feel that. But for the most part, when it comes to attacking the other person, this is always going to go into the presence video that I have, because it's always going to be the center core of a lot of the teachings that I have, because it helps with the anxiety. So you're always going to have some anxiety, and they're going to feel that off of you, and you might blame them, or they might blame you for whatever reason. Next, if this does happen, then when your partner hurts you, you love them, right? So this is going into when you have arguments and you feel like you're about to have sex, but for some reason they kind of ticked you off, and you won't have sex because you're getting back at them, or you just had a really bad day and you argued, and obviously that means no sex. So this is more about embracing, that, opposite feeling of what it is that opposite feeling between you and your partner and making that into love. Again, we're trying to change everything to a loving relationship because, how can you love a person and attack them the other way, as Eckhart Tolle actually said. Next is feeling through tension. So anytime that, you might feel that you can't perform, you have this idea that, that's it and done, and sometimes you feel frustrated because it becomes a reoccurring theme within the sexual relationship that you're trying to have. And you have to feel through that. Instead of, focusing so much on your performance, feel the experience. Start with kissing and then escalate from there for body touching, no genital touching until you feel like your arousal state and your heart rate is rising. So from there, you can work on, a lot of the things that you might be hiding. And, this could be, you might be attracted to other women, or you have a dark side to your sexuality that you are into, like BDSM or submissive dominance and stuff like that. So embracing this dark side, you have more depth as a woman and as a man. So that's always going to be a plus. It's never going to be a minus because, showing more to you, it's almost like the person can love you and fall in love with you once again because you showed them a new side to them. It's almost like they didn't even know who you were until that moment that you showed a dark side, because they always know, good little Susie or good little Joey, and, until they show that dark side. And as women have said, a man that gets really aggressive and really angry has deep passion. So that goes again with women as well, because, in my culture, they watch a lot of telenovelas, and these soap operas basically show that the women who are most emotional have the best sex, basically. But that's always commercialized and everything like that. So you can use these tendencies. So using dominance and submissive to magnify your desire for the other person, and this is always going to have more of, what is desire and where is it coming from? Is it an animalistic kind of thing, or is it coming out of love? So you can also change this animal lust into this fury of love, right? And I'm using a lot of the terminologies that David Deida actually uses in a lot of his books. The diction that he's going to have is really generalized, right? So just have that in mind. I'll actually follow up with the book if you didn't have a chance to actually read it. I'm going to actually summarize it because I want to reread it again. I like relearning stuff again and again. So that will be the next video on this series. So if you have any questions or concerns, or if you didn't understand anything that I actually said, that's perfectly fine, because it's a lot. And relationships are not easy. And sex is not simple. It's actually complicated. So once you have an array of emotions and complications and relationships, you're looking at a whole bunch of things that you're trying to juggle. So that's perfectly fine. The other one will be a little bit more, linear, a little bit more straightforward in terms of the practices that you can use. But for the most part, this is just going to have a balance between the two men and women and the relationship that they can have with each other. All right, guys, so I'm out and about what I just talked about. Peace.